dialogue between a great bodhisattva, the bodhisattva of great compassion, and Sariputta, one of the main disciples of the Buddha. And so the bodhisattva of great compassion, known for wisdom based on intuition, and Sariputta, known for wisdom based on knowledge of scripture and intellectual understanding. So they're having this great dialogue, and they keep bringing up this word empty and pointing us in that direction. And so one verse in particular, the bodhisattva holds on to nothing but prajna paramita. Therefore, the mind is clear of any delusive hindrance. Without hindrance, there is no fear. Away from all perverted views, one reaches final nirvana. So this emptiness, as we explored last week, can also be known as oneness, interconnection, no separate self, or boundlessness. And so starting from this place of emptiness, at least for me, it sort of took me to a place of boundlessness. Is that the same as boundarylessness? And boundarylessness kind of takes me to an uncomfortable place. I don't know where I'm going. I maybe want a navigation system. In reality, it means giving that up and focusing on interconnection. But let's play for a moment with that sense of boundlessness being sort of unmoored. How many of you read the e-bulletin this past week? Any of you? Okay, so we periodically send out an e-bulletin that always contains a daily Dharma section or an everyday Dharma section written by Haji Sunam, our senior priest. And she has something really interesting to say about navigation systems. So let me read what she wrote. Janine Bensis from On Being offers a story about Neona Thompson, who as a young man and native Hawaiian was mentored by one of the last wayfinders, who are people that get into these canoe-like boats and then head out into the ocean for thousands of miles. And out of the whole ocean, they were able to find land. They were able to find Tahiti. And they had all kinds of amazing qualities. So this is before sextants. So they didn't really have navigational instruments that we're used to. So this is like, how did they do this? And so his mentor Mao was teaching him, and he was about to go off on a journey to Tahiti, a modern day journey. And Mao took him out to the shoreline, and they were standing looking out into the ocean. And Mao said to him, "Can you see the island? Can you see Tahiti?" And he said, No, I can't see it. In my mind's eye, I can. And Mao said, "That's how you'll find it. Keep it in your mind's eye." So we're headed to the land of Praja. And so to me, this says, let's keep that in our mind's eye. This has to do with, if we're going to travel down this path of wisdom, we have to have probably some sort of clear intention to start with. A few other details. about this wayfinder named Mao. So he went on these journeys. In their boat, there were 15 of them. 14 of them were rowers. And as they navigated through the ocean, Mao sits at the back of the boat and he's studying the rhythm of the waves. He uses his memory of stars, habits of birds and fish, routes through reefs and atolls. He never sleeps more than a few hours at a time. A moment of vagueness and the vessel could drift off course and crash into a reef. So we bring to this navigation effort the sense of great alertness, great mindfulness. And to me, it feels like great connectedness in order to get us there. Sometimes when I'm feeling the need for a break to get away from the temple for a few days, I go off by myself. And when I go off by myself on these little solar sojourns, I connect with nature, which is good. But then I also find that it's an opportunity for me to be in a less structured environment. And so I get into mischief, so to speak. I find that it's a pleasure-seeking trip. And so, that's okay. I mean, you just find to have fun now and then. But inevitably, that leads me to a place of some dissatisfaction. And I feel rootless and unmoored. Why? Because I've kind of lost connection. And so I think this idea of connection is really important as we navigate our way toward prajna paramita. Connection being perhaps connection with one another. We're all in this boat together, right? And so everybody needs to participate and do their part. So what Zen practices do we have to help us with navigation that are somewhat equivalent? Mindfulness practices, great presence in the current moment, great faith, great intention. So these are principles that kind of come up. Okay. So now we've gone down that path of emptiness, boundarylessness, navigation. And so now this question of boundaries kind of emerges, because in everyday life, we have quite a lot of boundaries as we navigate the world. You came into this building today, you were probably greeted by somebody bowing to you. We have all these guidelines. Some of the rules are stated, some are not stated. So for example, one of our rules is don't put your feet on the mats and cushions. Well, if you're here for the first time, you probably wouldn't have known about that rule. And, we have all sorts of rules, those of us who live here, about how we practice together, when to show up, how we practice together, how we work together. I happen to be one of the people, because of my position in the community, who's a rule maker. And so I find myself, an interesting thing I run into about boundaries and rules is sometimes they're not wise, and sometimes they are too firm. I'll give you just a little example. The other day it snowed, And so our practice is when it snows, whoever's doing wake up goes around, they ring this bell, and everybody is supposed to get up, go outside and shovel snow at 5:30 a.m. And residents are pretty good about doing that. But I did notice that, it seemed like some residents were slow to get up, to go outside, to join in this practice. At least it felt slow. And I started to resent that. And when I feel like resentment or being taken advantage of, that means I have some kind of boundary there that I have to work with. And the boundary I was working with is, hey, some of these residents are 50 years younger than I am. Why do I, at age 72 with a heart condition, go out and get the snow done before they ever get up? And so we had a discussion about snow practice at breakfast. I suspended my desire to work with this rule in a tight way. I mean, I could have just started out with, hey, you weren't outside. You should have been out there in 15 minutes. So instead, we had a more open discussion. How did our snow practice go? And in that discussion, lots of interesting things emerged. Well, if when you're ringing that bell, if you don't also tell me it's a snow day, I won't know that, and I will stay in bed. Okay, that's something I didn't know. And there was confusion about the kind of salt we're using on various pathways, this kind of thing. So at the end of the discussion, we had guidelines that were more workable, more permeable, useful to the community. So this is one type of boundary setting, sort of working with the rules. And in as we work with relationships in our lives, I'm sure you all have boundaries that you encounter. I am not a trained therapist at all, so I leave the topic of working with relationship boundaries mostly to others. This can get into some pretty deep dysfunctional habitual patterns that take people a long while to work through. So I'm going to just speak about one other type of boundary, which I find interesting. And this is boundaries that I set on myself. And so these ideas about who I am, what I can do, how I can work with other people. So I may start with this intention. Our intention is Project Paramita. Well, maybe part of that intention for me is compassion. But then I say to myself, I'm not a very compassionate person. It's just not in my nature. I'm just kind of a grouch sometimes. And I don't always want to sit and listen to people and yada, yada, yada. And so when I go down that path, that's not very helpful because actually all of us have the capacity for compassion. And I just have to learn to work with it in my own way. See. So, and work-life balance is another sort of set of boundaries that I confront on a regular basis. Because in any sort of community, in your family community, in your work, the work there's work there to be done. And you have to manage your energy level in order to do that and not just take it on because it's there to be done. So the challenge with boundaries, this practical aspect of things, is not too tight, not too loose. We're never going to get rid of the boundaries. I think they seem to be somewhat necessary as we navigate together. Okay. So this is a huge topic, as you can see. We've been kind of all over the place, starting with this broad notion of emptiness, interconnection, boundlessness, moving into navigation and boundaries. And because we're on this boat together, I need your wisdom to figure out how to knit these things together in a way that makes sense and is useful. So I'm going to pass the microphone and ask for your assistance, your comments on these topics.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Good morning. My name is Qigong around these parts, MC out here. And I'm just thinking, the last thing you said, Mom, about having these boundaries be not too tight and not too loose. I work as a municipal engineer, and I deal with a lot of ordinances in different municipalities, specifically stormwater ordinances, which I'm sure everyone's eyes just kind of glaze over. But it's a real trick when municipalities, cities, and villages and townships ask us to make the rules for what you can build and where and how to manage the rainwater. And it's really tricky. It's really difficult to come up with an ordinance that's tight enough that everyone is held accountable, but loose enough that it accounts for creativity, people's ideas, and how they want to make their homes. And it's really, really difficult. So I'm taking this to heart in a way of how do we make our laws, how do we make our ordinances, how do we run our communities in a very practical way, much as maybe you run this temple in a very practical way. It's not easy.
My name is Katie. Something that came to my mind was my children, and my nature is to be more free flowing without many boundaries or structure. But over the last few years, I've learned how to include my spiritual practice and discipline in my own life, and I feel like with my children, I can see them thriving when I am able to help guide them or navigate them towards healthy behaviors. But it's definitely not like a natural way for me to be. So I think it's been tricky to be able, a challenge for me to be able to learn how to do that for my children in a way that's not like kind of authoritarian type. So yeah, I'm grateful to be here and learn more about that.
So when you mentioned kind of boundlessness and emptiness, the thing that I initially thought of, so a lot of your comments were around kind of external things, but the thing that kind of came to me were some experiences that I had through meditation, which were just very internal things. So kind of when you close your eyes and, you know, kind of sit with that, well, I had certain experiences of kind of the emptiness through everything, but then also kind of the boundlessness. And so for me, kind of stitching those things together is not necessarily like the external world, but kind of the internal world and the journey through there.
Hi, Sandra. I was having trouble with the personal boundary of eating chocolate. It was not under control. A couple months ago, I decided, you can't deny yourself totally because then you feel like you're denying yourself something you want. But so I came up with I eat these little chocolate wafers and I eat 2 of them right after breakfast. And then the rest of the day, if I think about it, I already had chocolate today. And it's worked out, for a couple of months. Yeah. Met in the middle.
Middle way. So I'm really big with schedules. And I found that that's also kind of like that boundary type thing. And especially recently because A, I got more time because all the snow got because my school was like, it's too cold. But B, also because testing. So it's like I have to study at this point in time. And then I get a little break and I study at this point in time. And I found that more and more I was more focused on what time it is, how much time I have, what I'm using it for. And stacking up my day could just be there's all these plans and schedules. And I found that was actually very limiting. So recently I actually took some time, sat down, did something I hadn't done in a long time, which was drawing. And, in that own way, it was kind of like, I was taking away the boundary.
Good morning. My name is Young Child. And the boundary that I have today, in my household. My wife is in her mid-60s, like my own. I'm 72 as well. So the boundaries we set up is that nobody go out after dark. And not as we go together. She called that control. I call that safety. So, that's the boundary that we set. But I really wanted to talk about that word emptiness that I was taught by my teacher. And that's only viewed through the practice. There's no word to describe it. You have to actually experience it to know it to be true. And then you see the emptiness of all things. And viewing it from that perspective, we have a great, great, great freedom. And we don't attach to anything. We see and accept things just as they are, knowing that they're empty in their nature. Thank you.
Hi, Samuel. My name is Alex. One thing I've found for myself with sort of well-crafted boundaries or thoughtful boundaries in place is that they can lead to understanding. So there's a recognition of some pattern or some interconnectedness that's important. So it helps see that clearly. So a lot of times that interconnectedness then can kind of point back to that feeling of, or that experience of emptiness or non-separation. Makes sense.
So something that came up for me when you were talking, Mom, was how you decided to navigate a community pitfall. Because, I've learned that one thing that's really important in community, whether it's, you're a project manager in a business or, any kind of manager, any kind of sort of position of heading a community is, blame and focusing on the past doesn't actually do anyone any good. And so it's like, okay, if there was a failure, that means that there's something systemic, and how do we find the systemic issue so that the people in the community can be supported so that they don't make the same fall again. And people have different needs, and we think like, well, I have this need and this is how I envision getting it met. And then the person or people that we're dealing with, that we're engaging with, also have their needs and their visions of how they want to or think they're going to get it met. And if we put all of that out on the table and start working with it, and I think that you described this process beautifully, if we can find a third way, not my way, not your way, but a third way that actually gets everyone's needs met in a more elegant way, in a novel way that no one person would have thought of until we all came together as a community and tried to both hold our own boundaries and get our own needs met and work with everyone to get their needs met.
Or in the words of the author Stephen Covey, seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Thank you. Thank you. It's I love this conversation. I've been thinking recently about my grandmother who passed a year ago, and thinking about boundaries and how they can be useful in some ways, about thinking about this person was here, they're no longer here. But one thing that's been very comforting to me is to think about how those boundaries are sort of imagined in a lot of ways. My grandmother's genetics are in me. The nature reserve where she spent a lot of her life continues on, and a lot of like her work continues on, and my memories of her continue on, and recordings of her. So thinking about how when were we really born? When do we really pass? Are we born when somebody first conceives of us, or when our parents are conceived, and so on? So thinking about the boundaries to myself and my personhood and the boundaries of other humans, I think is much more amorphous than it may be at first glance, and I find a lot of comfort in that. So it's a very comforting conversation to me to think about boundaries and how they may be more permeable than they appear.
On that subject of where we truly begin, and I think a lot about how, the atoms that make up our body have existed for billions of years and been, fused together in stars and lain dormant in the planet's crust forever and been recycled through a million different organisms before it finally gets to us. And then for a brief moment in time, this collection of atoms can feel things like justice and joy and envy and fear and regret and shame and just all of these emotions and feelings. When we die, the atoms that make up our body get recycled into other things. So in a sense, we're borrowing our bodies.
Hello, Sandra. My name is Matt. We'll talk about work a lot. My supervisor doesn't like my workflow, which is respectable because it's chaotic. It involves few boundaries. I jump from task to task and I get everything done by noon, so that in the afternoon I have plenty of empty time to do other things that need to be done. But I can respect his position because when he has to explain my workflow to his superiors, he often ends up drawing a blank. And I'm trying lately to respect his position a little bit more and work more within the boundaries of the workflow that he's set out. I don't really know what I wanted to say about it, just that that's how this discussion has reflected in me.
Okay, so thanks for going along this journey with me this morning. And we will move, so continue to encourage you to think about these topics that we brought up this morning for yourself in your daily life. Let's move now to some announcements.
Hello, everyone. So, can you hear me okay? I need to have my hands free from the announcements. Good to see you all here. So many of you. It's like more than 50 people, I think, which is good. A couple of weeks ago, I heard it was pretty low. So let's see. We're on the last week of January, so February is coming up. Relatedly, 2025 marks the year of the wood snake. I don't know if you've heard this. I assume it's the Chinese New Year. The wood snake represents imagination and creativity. And we're going to have a special Sunday service on February 2nd, followed by a week of chanting for world peace. And I've also been told that there are a couple of very special announcements. On February 2nd and 9th, right after the morning service, there will be informational meetings about Buddhist precepts classes. Precepts are the key moral guidelines of our Buddhist tradition. Each year we offer the opportunity to formally become a Buddhist by completing a series of 7 classes and doing special practices at home. At the end of the classes, you will receive beads, a certificate, and be given a formal Buddhist name. Classes begin February 13th. There will be a concluding precept ceremony on May 18th. Please sign up if you are interested. And the other announcement that I was asked to read was that the temple offers meditation classes on a regular basis. The course includes some simple stretching exercises, work with the breath, meditation postures, concentration, and mindfulness practice. Everything you need to know to support your own home practice. Our 5-week version offers 2 hours of instruction per week from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. on Thursday evenings. There'll be a course that begins on Thursday, February 13th. We also offer the same instruction in a condensed overnight format from Friday evening at 7 p.m. through noon on Saturday. This version includes an overnight stay and breakfast at the temple. Our next overnight meditation class will be offered January 24th to 25th. So
And March 21st and 22nd.
Oh, March 21st and 22nd. Okay. Good. And other announcements that we've got this week. Generally, we have yoga practice on Tuesday evenings here in this room. 6:30 to 8 with David Black. He's an excellent yoga instructor and author of the tradition. Similarly, we have work periods on Saturdays, 3 to 5. And those are sometimes we call them together action. You may have done them before. We have a special time in the summer, often when we go after service. But this is a 2-hour block that we reserve on Saturday. So please, if you're interested, come here. And if you have questions, you can always ask me or any of the people wearing gray robes, or probably other people have been there too. Let's see. We've got special family services. I was talking to someone out in the lobby today about this. The second Sunday of every month is reserved for kind of a hybrid family service where we've got kids at first and adults. The adults can then stay and the kids can go off and do their thing. We have 4 p.m. services also on Sundays, on the first and the third Sundays of the month, and that's here at 4 p.m. We have a little bit of time here, so actually 11:30. I'll wrap up. Well, basically, thank you for coming, joining in today, being part of the Sangha. Your presence here is wonderful, and like I was saying, there are things you can do around the temple to get involved, and also you can make monetary donations right outside the door. We have a fish bowl, we have a point of sale thing. We appreciate that. I mean, everything here is done by us, so it's good to see you all today, and I'll hand it back over to Mom.
Is Joshua here today? So would you please raise your hand? Hutchinson will meet with you about the music after service. Yeah. All right. Let's all stand. We'll make 3 formal bows, and then if you could assist us in putting away mats and cushions, it would be most appreciated. Okay, so just feeling our feet connected all the way down to the earth beneath us, enjoying the presence of fellow practitioners. We'll make 3 mindful bows.
So Christians from the center 2 rows can stay, and the ones on the outside can be taken either over there or into the back corner.
Even on the runs to a power dance. Yeah, we're stuff like reading cases, right? It's the only one, baby. A couple hours. Is it like 2 hours from me? You can have it. What's your big breakfast stuff? Settled in? Yes. The whole thing was live streamed on YouTube. Yeah. Nice. Start watching it at home. Terrible. I suppose. It's not the same as being here, but yeah. This is a cool experience. I do this again.
Let's expand it, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, his energy goes back up. Yeah.